Episode 20. 9 Lives and Cultured Barbarians. At least we found out why our Russian holiday described itself as a 5-star camping experience. That's the average amount of night sky visible through the top of the tent. When we started this journey, there were 30 tents and 53 beds, which should have been plenty, given that one couple never turned up in Zeebrugge. Nothing remarkable in these laid-back days, except that they were aptly named Mr. and Mrs. Forsyth. But by Leningrad, the aluminium poles have lost contact with their canvas relatives and several metal pieces have been bent or broken. It's the evening before our first sightseeing day in Leningrad, as it's known in these days of the Soviet Union. There's the usual mad scramble for tent poles and canvases, followed closely by a similarly frantic hunt for bed parts. Gone are the days of gentlemanly or ladylike deference. Now it's camping red in tooth and claw. So far, the ignominy of being left standing when the metaphorical music stops, clutching 2.5 bent poles and a severed bed, has been shared out pretty evenly amongst the groups that make up our coach party. Whether you're one of the Indian family, where everyone over the age of 20 seems to be called doctor, or the Cockney undertakers, or the students from Fife, Marseille, Rome and London, someone in your group will have experienced the shame of having to share with Snorri Doreen or Whiffy Jeff. Food is perhaps better organized, but not much. Each group is responsible for shopping, cooking and washing up for one dinner and one breakfast, described by Cesar as forage and porridge. Fortunately, we were early on the rota and did our bit reasonably competently, although not as well as the Indian family, who seemed to have stashed a mini spice cupboard in their luggage. I wonder what the Soviet border police would have made of that. If they had found the garam masala instead of my radioactive mother, the KGB colonel would have forged some literary links with the ancient Indian epic tales, or perhaps with the spy who came in from the Chile. Unfortunately, when it comes to catering, ours is a mixed ability coach party. More on this later, but today is all about seeing Leningrad. Here in 1969, there are still glaring gaps where war damage has not yet been repaired, much like Manchester in fact, except that many of the wrecked buildings here were elegant apartment blocks and major monuments. Whereas in Manchester the many ugly scars still visible at the end of the 60s had previously been grim rows of brick houses, which had been slums since the day they were built. But even for a hardened Mancunian like me, St. Isaac's Cathedral comes as a bit of a shock. I was going to say Leningrad Cathedral, but the Soviet name is not appropriate for the grand architecture of old St. Petersburg. We have come across a half-dome before, in Yosemite National Park, but the ruins of the mighty cathedral dome here are an obscenity. There's enough of it left standing to show what a magnificent structure it once was. It would be easy to accuse the atheist communist government of neglect, but that wouldn't be fair. The state treats churches as museums, which means they are valuable for attracting tourists and their precious hard currency. Our walking tour guide, who insists on being called Tati despite her immaculate appearance, is uncharacteristically tight-lipped on the subject of religion. Cesar and Paul have done incredibly well at getting freebies from the state agency in tourist. All our visits are free of charge, and we are treated like VIPs wherever we go. But they have excelled themselves with Tati. She manages to get all the communist propaganda in without missing a beat in her lively narrative. Tati is on a mission all of her own, and she gives the impression that she is on the stage, acting her little heart out, and she really is minuscule. Paul gets her to pose with Tiny the boss for photos, and the effect is startling. They look like different species, and I am instantly reminded of a friend's dog called Grudel. In honor of his Great Dane father and toy poodle mother, it's hard to look at Grudel without wondering about the logistics of his conception, although my friend informs me that a set of steps, a long run-up and a great deal of perseverance were all included. Love will find a way. Tati seems to have a story about the inhabitants of every grand building we walk past, and she spins us tales of greed and marital infidelity, but she excels herself with her blow-by-blow account of the death of Rasputin in 1916. You might have thought that a walking tour was not a suitable format for recounting a murder, and, in this case, you would be literally dead wrong. Grigory Yefimovich Rasputin has been variously described by history as evil personified, a hypnotic monk and Russia's greatest love machine. He was indeed a Russian Orthodox monk, but not much like our Western European idea of a typical member of a monastic order. He rarely washed and never cut his hair. His lust for life, power and women knew no bounds, making him a much-hated target for his enemies in the imperial court. It also made him very, very difficult to kill. I have no idea how accurate Tati's account of Rasputin's death is, but it's pretty compelling stuff. She asks for a volunteer to play the part of the hirsute mad monk, but there's really only one candidate. Step forward, Harry Mary, Cesar exclaims gleefully. Mario the Roman student seems happy to oblige. He certainly has the hair for the role. We start in the Yusupov Palace and Tati tells us of the strange hold Rasputin had over the imperial court. She describes graphically how irresistible he was to women, explaining the hatred and fear he engendered in prominent members of the aristocracy. And then we cut to the chase, or rather the killing. No doubt the story has grown in the telling, but it has the ring of truth about it, mainly because it is hard to believe that anyone could invent something so implausible and warped. Plunging gleefully into her role, Tati gives Mario enough poison to take out a medium-sized town, and then proceeds to stab, shoot, and drown him in the freezing waters outside the palace gates. And because Rasputin had more lives than any cat, she goes through her repertoire again until the mad monk is finally, irreversibly dead. Entertaining though this reenactment is, there appears that there is no lesson to be learned, except perhaps that if you want to assassinate a possessed religious fanatic, you had better come well prepared. After the demise of Rasputin, you might think the next stop on our walking tour is going to be a bit of an anticlimax, but the Winter Palace is far from that, not that this is the only palace in town. First Catherine the Great, then Peter the Great, and no doubt other members of the Great family lavished huge amounts of time and money on building this beautiful city. At one point, Peter banned building in stone throughout the empire so that all resources could be focused on his grand project, allegedly. There are more palaces here than you can shake a stick at, which is an activity I would not recommend in Cold War Russia. In addition to the grand homes of the nobility, there's an imperial winter palace, a summer palace and probably a 23rd of April if it's not too parky palace. Tati takes us on what she calls the short tour of the winter palace. Russia came comparatively late to the palace building party, so the architects had plenty of Western European models to choose from. The result is a light and airy style, exuding delicate, cultured good taste, but there are signs from the start that the superficial impressions may be misleading. First, there's all the gold. Someone here has serious guilt issues. Then there's the scale. Our tour covers a full set of grand rooms, set out in the traditional manner of a great house such as Versailles. But the builders didn't stop there. Our tour only covers 1/7 of the complete palace. You've got to ask yourself what this immense building is there for. It's hard to escape the conclusion that, for all the elegant tastefulness, the message to visiting monarchs is about as subtle as a sledgehammer. Mine is bigger than yours. Oh, don't you have 1.5 tons of gold leaf on your walls? Don't you have enough corridors to run an indoor marathon? It's the same story with the Hermitage Museum and Art Gallery. As the old-fashioned tailors used to say, never mind the quality, Feel the width. The amount of paintings on display is beyond staggering. You definitely can't see it all unless you have half a lifetime to spare. So Tati takes us to the modern art section. It wouldn't have been my first choice, but she knows what she is doing. The Hermitage has an unrivaled collection of modern painting donated to the Soviet Union by artists so left-leaning they are practically horizontal. There is a collection of Picasso's Blue Period, and some portraits painted when he had cheered up a bit and realized that a woman's face needed more than just the one nose. But for me, the star of the show is Matisse, large colourful canvases mounted haphazardly on the walls in full sun, paint cracking and peeling from neglect, a perfect metaphor for 1960s Russia. And now for the part I am most looking forward to, another freebie negotiated for us by Paul and Chesa, beef stroganoff made in the kitchen where it was invented. But first we must say our thanks and goodbyes to our guide Tati. Oddly, she doesn't want to stay for lunch, but once again this is proof that she knows what she is doing. The surroundings are certainly grand enough, with walls covered in murals, and the biggest, Berlingus chandelier I have ever seen. We order the two dishes this restaurant is famous for, the stroganoff and the bombe surprise, an iced cake which popularized ice cream long before the Marquis de Sade, known to his friends as Mr. Whippy. Another reminder of France is the service. True, these Russian waiters don't have the studied, spiteful arrogance of their French counterparts, but they are just as adept at avoiding eye contact. It's as if they are taking no part in the restaurant, and they're certainly not going to accept responsibility for anything that might go wrong. After 2 hours of blind man's buff, the food arrives, all of it. With the stroganoff comes a bread roll, 1/4 gram of spread, half a glass of water between two, and a large plate of ice cream. We decide to go the conventional route and tackle the stroganoff first, but that means getting through the layer of stuff on top of the creamy sauce. This could be charitably described as a skin. If so, it would have to be the skin of an elephant. Or Boris Johnson. But this one looks more like a veneer, or perhaps the Exxon Valdez. My offer to carve the gravy falls on deaf ears. The food under the slick would probably be worth eating, though not worth waiting hours for. The best description I can use is ex-good, and the same goes for the bombe surprise, which is no colder than the main course, which is hovering just on the gastroenteritis side of stone cold. By this time, it comes as no surprise that it bombed. I think the historical and beautiful surroundings deserve a positive review, but the best I can offer is where good food goes to die. The next 2 days go by in a blur of pretty landscape, elegant palaces and tales of their barbarian owners. Not a single word is said about the common people in the days of serfdom. No reconstruction of peasant homes or the way they worked. It seems an odd omission for a communist government, which purports to be the champion of the people. But we are told that all will be explained when we get to Moscow. But I need a break before we start the next chapter. Time travel is proving to be hard work, so I will see you again after I've had a hot shower and a rub down with a half brick.